Disgraced pop star Gary Glitter has been freed from jail after serving just half of his 16-year sentence. The 78-year-old, who had a string of hits in the 70s, was jailed in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls. And let's be honest, he has a rap sheet as long as your arm, doesn't he? Joining me now is a lawyer who's representing one of Gary Glitter's victims. With me now is Richard Scorer, Head of Abuse Law at Slater and Gordon Lawyers. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Great to have you on. The fact that Gary Glitter has been allowed out early, I think will shock people. Your views?
Well, it should shock people. I think it's wrong. I mean, it's how the system works. If you have a determinate sentence under the law that applies to him, then you're released on licence halfway through in most situations. I think that's wrong. I think it offends against the principle of justice, and it's particularly wrong because the idea of releasing people early is about trying to rehabilitate them. But this man will never be rehabilitated. I mean, he's never shown any remorse for his crimes. He's never apologised. He's never even admitted actually that he did these things that he was convicted for. And he probably represents a continuing danger to the public. So I think it does offend against people's sense of justice that he gets this early release. But that's how the law works, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the police will say and the justice authorities will say he's under very strict licensing conditions. Yeah, OK, I think a lot of people will be of the mind that if you commit crimes, especially against children, that, well, maybe even go as far as to say a lifetime in prison isn't quite enough. I think we all know what I'm alluding to there. However, Richard, are the victims lost in all of this?
I think they are, and I spoke to my client earlier today, and she was finding this very difficult and very, very distressing. It was a very hard day for her, and what she said to me was, this man gave me a life sentence, of trauma and nightmares and the post-traumatic stress disorder that she has, and for very, very serious abuse. I mean, the worst kind of abuse that you can imagine. When she was 12, and she does feel forgotten in all of this. She said that early release like this, it devalues the experience of people like her. She was promised justice, and she doesn't feel that this gives it to her.
No, I can only imagine how she must be feeling, and it is absolutely horrific. And you look at someone like Gary Glitter, and there's been serious question marks about his behaviour in Cambodia, Vietnam, more than question marks. Obviously, situations over here, and you really drill down into some of the cases as well. As you said there, your client was 12. I understand that one of them was as young as 10 years old as well.
That's right.
And you've hit the nail on the head, I think, when you talk about rehabilitation. You do not believe that he is capable of being rehabilitated, which, if we take that to his natural conclusion, means that he will, in your view, always pose a threat to society. Locked away forever, then, in your view, should he be?
Well, he should certainly serve the full sentence in prison that he was given back in 2015, and I think that that's the most offensive thing, is the idea that you get out halfway through. But he does represent, in my view, a continuing risk. I mean, the probation service, of course, will say that they will manage that risk, that he will have licence conditions attached, but I think it is very difficult for victims to see somebody like this released out into the community. Indeed. And fundamentally be at liberty, be subject to conditions.
Yeah. Now, can I just broaden this out a little bit, actually, because it's all very well and good talking about Gary Glitter, and that name in itself gets the headlines, OK? But actually, if this is happening with someone like Gary Glitter, how many convicted paedophiles and horrific sex offenders are just out walking the streets at the minute?
I couldn't give you an absolute number, but the fact is, as you'll be aware, that most people who commit serious sex offences don't get life sentences. I mean, that does occasionally happen, but the vast majority don't. And then, of course, as with Glitter, there will be release halfway through, albeit on licence. So, I mean, the reality is that there will be a lot of people walking the streets who have committed serious sex offences, who've served prison terms for them, but have then been released. I mean, that is the reality that we have as a society. And, of course, for victims, that is a very, very difficult thing to deal with.
I can only imagine. Look, Richard, thank you very, very much. And we won't go into, obviously, any huge amounts of specifics of your client. There are several ongoing issues there, as I understand it, so we'll leave that be for now. But, Richard, thank you. Much appreciated to have your insights and your intellect on this particular topic on the show. Richard Scorer there, Head of Abuse Law at Slater and Gordon Lawyers. And, yeah, it's not just about Gary Glitter, is it, really? It's about the wider picture, the bigger picture, the fact that people who can commit very, very, very serious and multiple offences against children can serve what some would argue is a minuscule amount of time in a prison. And it was a low-security prison at that as well.